Hello, Wake Up New Zealand, Carol Sakey speaking. Well, on Counterspin tonight, Counterspin Media, Kelyn Alp will be having a special guest on, as he usually does, but this time it's a young woman by the name of Carlene, and she opens up her story about how she is a staunch child advocate and about child exploitation and how children have been affected in New Zealand. She will be opening the doors to much of what many people, a lot of people, do not know about in New Zealand. In New Zealand, we have very high stats as per the developed world per population for sexual abuse, for child abuse, physical and mental. And these are reports done by UNICEF, UN. So also the US state have actually given a report stating that New Zealand is very high on the list of places where children are being exploited, human trafficking is happening, and we've really got our heads in the sand. The government's got its head in the sand, so they say. And they did a report in 2019 and classified New Zealand a hotspot for human trafficking and child exploitation, forced labour, children being in the sex trade. They reported that globally 1.2 million children are trafficked yearly, and that trafficking of children is the third largest crime in the world. Second is legal drugs and first arms trafficking. But there are billions of dollars being made in exploitation of children, sexual slavery, child sex exploitation, and trafficking of human beings. In 2007, New Zealand authorities prosecuted 31 cases of sexual exploitation of minors, resulted in 25 convictions. Of those 25 convictions, 5 were jailed, 12 community services, 3 fines, 2 probation sentences, and 3 were acquitted. So it appears that there seems to be a lack of information, investigative material around what is happening in New Zealand. And it's really difficult to find specific information on child trafficking, of human trafficking. But it doesn't mean that it's not happening, because obviously it is happening. So, children are particularly vulnerable because they're easily manipulated, can be overpowered and controlled, and they are easily emotionally exploited. So the US report talked about children being emotionally exploited, being sold to support finances of the family, for gang members, put on the streets, etc., etc. But we never hear about this in the mainstream propaganda reporting, do we? So the UNICEF has reported that many Pacific islands are open to human trafficking, and they name Tonga as being quite big one, Fiji, Kiribati. It doesn't say about Samoa, but I believe there is some information on Samoa. So they talk about 660 approximately islands, atolls across the Pacific, and I believe about 17.5 million kilometres of Pacific Ocean, with 1.2 million children living across those areas. So on the 26th of June 2019, Stuff New Zealand reported that they accused their government of having their heads in the sand, stated that, they looked at that US report and they said, look here, they're saying that New Zealand is a hot spot for sexual exploitation, and why is nothing being done about this? Why isn't it just under the covers? So this allegation was made by ECPAT Child Alert Director Eleanor Parks, referring to a released official report where she painted a picture of the scale of human trafficking in New Zealand and the government's response to it. And it was mentioned the US states stands by its 2019 report as New Zealand being the hotspot for sexual exploitation, which involved young children, teenagers being recruited for prostitution by gang members, boyfriends, family members, and others. They also said they cited a case in 2018 where a 15-year-old girl was kept as a sex slave. And this was evidence-based, and the New Zealand government refused to acknowledge there was a problem even. So the US report argues that Kiwi boys and girls, often from minority communities, were regularly sexually exploited, and that's what they said in their report, saying that the annual monitor for the second year running, that's 2017 to 2019, only met minimum standards for combating human trafficking in New Zealand. And the New Zealand government again denies these accusations. New Zealand authorities launched 2 investigations into human trafficking in 2018, but gave no assistance to, did not identify, assist any victims of sex trafficking. In 2019, 5 people were convicted in 3 child sexual exploitation cases under the Prostitution Reform Act. And those sentences ranged from 9 months home detention to 10 plus years. The US state blames the inaction of New Zealand government, the authorities, the possible lack of investigations, coordination between government and agencies, social services. And they recommend that New Zealand government change the law, because to escape from prison sentences, these crims are offered to pay a fine. They're allowed to pay a fine to escape prison sentences on many occasions. So the Minister of Justice in 2014 gave a report of 50 victims to sexual exploitation, one of which was a child. However, it was very flimsy and not very transparent, because they said they were unsure whether it was sexual exploitation or not. So obviously there's some really serious flaws that's going on in the New Zealand justice system, the government, the police, right across the board. So we don't get to know what is happening. We never really get to know the truth, do we? There's no transparency. And as I say, you won't find out through mainstream media propaganda reporting. So New Zealand Herald on the 22nd of September 2016 exposed the dark underbelly of human trafficking in New Zealand. A young woman was sold for $3,000. Sex slaves were working for 12 hours a day. Passports were confiscated, false promises made, coercion, manipulation, threats, modern-day slavery. So, what is happening in the dark underbelly of New Zealand, or is it happening right before our eyes and it's not being publicised? They're deliberately not telling us what is going on. So, I urge you people to watch Counterspin tonight as Carlene Hereora is a guest on Counterspin. She will be interviewed by Kelyn Alp, and Carlene courageously speaks out about what she has experienced, what she knows, and she is a staunch advocate of speaking out for children in New Zealand. She will be exposing state-sponsored child abuse that's been covered up for decades. It was only a couple of episodes back that we heard about the terrible, horrific abuses from children to adults in the Lake Alice institution in the South Island, where a man bravely spoke up, and he's been fighting this for decades to get acknowledgement. And yes, it just blew me away when I heard that episode. Now you can go back and look at that episode. This is episode 5 tonight. So you can search out the whole previous 4 episodes. I will leave you the links to go to so that you can follow it at 8 o'clock tonight. Carlene being interviewed, 8 o'clock, Counterspin. Counterspin Media you can catch on Monday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. weekly. So Monday and Thursday, 8 p.m. This is the truth, you will be told. This is not fake news. This is not propaganda. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is actually a conspiracy. It is the truth. So I urge you to follow it on Gab, Rumble, YouTube, Instagram, Podbean, and I will leave the links right here for you. So I urge you to view that tonight and follow Counterspin, and you will be truly amazed at the truth that is coming out right now. Thank you. Please share, 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 and subscribe.